The ungrateful never know what they're losing until they've lost everything. There in the airport terminal, my son's look said it all. I was nothing but an inconvenient old man, a walking ATM who should stay home. In that moment, 71 years of life came crashing down on me. My name is Sebastian Figueroa. I'm 71 years old, and I've lived in Atlanta, Georgia since I can remember. I worked my entire life as a civil engineer, building apartment complexes, bridges and overpasses throughout the state. I retired about 10 years ago, but I still do some consulting here and there because a Southern man never really stops working. Life in Atlanta has its hustle and bustle, but after so many years, you learn to find tranquility, even amidst the noise. I was never one for showing off, you know. I grew up watching my father save every penny to ensure our livelihood. My mother, God rest her soul, took in sewing to supplement our income. I learned early on the value of hard work and saving. When I married my Teresa, we promised that our children would have more opportunities than we did, and we kept that promise. We saved, invested, and bought land that appreciated over the years. Teresa came from a family of farmers, and the land she inherited was well managed. We worked ourselves to the bone to build solid assets. Richard, our only son, attended the best schools, went to a private college, got a brand new car when he graduated, married Patricia, a beautiful woman but with her nose in the air, one of those who thinks money grows on trees. They gave me 2 grandchildren, Lucas, now 16, and Sophie, 14. After Teresa passed away 5 years ago, I lived for them. I was an unashamedly doting grandfather. I thought it was reciprocal, that love and respect went both ways. Until that morning at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, when I discovered in the worst possible way that for some, a father's value is reduced to his credit card limit. Before continuing this story, I'd like to thank the Grandpa's Voice channel for allowing me to share my story. And I ask you who are watching to subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. Every day there's a new story here from people who, like me, have learned hard lessons about family and gratitude. If you're just starting to watch now, prepare your heart, because what I'm about to tell isn't easy, but it's the honest truth of how I discovered my son's true character, because of a trip to Disney World. And let me tell you how this story began, because the fall hurts more when you don't see the hole ahead. I was born in rural Georgia, in a small town called Oakville, about 90 miles from Atlanta. My father worked the land growing corn and beans on a piece of property that barely supported the family. We were 5 siblings, and from a young age I helped with the work. I woke up before sunrise and only stopped when night had fallen. Calloused hands and a sunburned face were marks we all shared. I was always good with numbers and had a knack for farm construction projects. When I finished middle school, my father gathered all the family's savings and sent me to study in Atlanta, at my uncle's house. "Go, son, study, make something of yourself," he said with those rough hands squeezing my shoulder. It was the greatest proof of love he could give, giving up my labor on the farm so I could have a better future. In Atlanta, I studied like a man possessed. I got into civil engineering at Georgia Tech. I worked during the day and studied at night. On weekends, I did technical drawing side jobs for architecture firms. I had no time for partying or dating. My goal was, of course, to graduate and repay my parents' sacrifice. After graduating, I joined a respected construction company. I worked from sunup to sundown, climbed scaffolding, supervised construction sites, argued with bricklayers and directors alike. Southerners are known for being skeptical, and I brought that trait to my work. I checked every detail, every measurement, every material. Trust, but verify. That was my motto. I rose through the company, earning respect and eventually profit-sharing. My routine was demanding. I left home at 6 a.m. and often didn't return until after 9 p.m. I traveled throughout the state, inspecting projects in distant towns. I spent days away from home, sleeping in simple hotels or sometimes in construction site trailers. It wasn't easy, but a man bears the load when he knows why he's carrying it. It was during the construction of an overpass in Savannah that I met Teresa. She was the daughter of a local farm owner and had come to the site to complain that our trucks were making a mess at her property entrance. She arrived angry, but left smiling. We started dating, and less than a year later we were married. Teresa came from a traditional family with some land in the countryside. She wasn't rich, but she was comfortable. Even so, we decided to start from scratch with what we earned together. We bought a small apartment in Atlanta and built our life brick by brick, just as I did with my buildings. When Richard was born in 1981, it was the greatest joy of our lives. A strong, intelligent boy, full of energy. From an early age, I wanted to give him everything, but without spoiling him. "We're raising a man, not a pushover," I'd tell Teresa when she wanted to coddle the boy too much. He attended the best private schools in Atlanta, took English classes from age 6. He had swimming lessons, judo, piano, everything I never had but dreamed of for him. When it came time for college, Richard wanted to study business administration. We paid for Emory University, one of the best in Georgia. While his classmates worked to pay their bills, he could dedicate himself exclusively to his studies. During vacations, we traveled to the coast or abroad. I wanted him to have a broad view of the world, to experience other cultures, to learn to value what he had. After graduating, he opened a construction company in partnership with me. We invested heavily, hired a top-notch team, secured important projects in the city. The Figueroa name became synonymous with quality in civil construction. I handled the technical side. He handled administration. It seemed like the perfect arrangement. Richard met Patricia at a company party. She was the daughter of an important client, accustomed to the good life without much effort. I confess it wasn't love at first sight between her and me. I found her a bit shallow, always talking about international travel, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, but my son's heart had chosen, and it wasn't my place to interfere. When they got married, I gave them a 3-bedroom condo in an upscale Atlanta neighborhood as a gift. Furnished, decorated, ready to move in. Teresa thought it was too much, that they should earn things on their own, but I argued that I wanted to give my son what I never had, a comfortable start. Soon came the grandchildren, first Lucas, then Sophie. They were a beautiful family to behold. During Sunday lunches at our house, I felt my chest swell with pride. My sacrifices had been worth it. I had worked hard so my son wouldn't have to go through what I did, and it seemed I had succeeded. When Teresa fell ill 7 years ago, everything changed. The cancer was quick and devastating. In 6 months, I lost my companion of almost 4 decades. I was adrift, without ground beneath my feet. Richard and his family grew closer during this period. They visited more often, took me out. The grandkids sometimes slept at my place. It was a comfort in my pain. After the initial mourning, I decided to reorganize my life. I sold our house, too big for me alone, and bought a smaller condo, easier to maintain. I handed over complete management of the construction company to Richard, staying only as a consultant, and began thinking about how to distribute the assets that Teresa and I had built. Besides the construction company, we had investments, rental properties, and mainly Teresa's family lands. With urban expansion and agribusiness development, those farms that once seemed to have little value had transformed into small fortunes. All told, our assets approached $2.3 million. An entire lifetime of work and saving materialized. I began to notice some changes in Richard and Patricia's behavior around this time. The visits became more frequent, but also more self-interested. They always asked about the properties, about how much each thing was worth. Richard started suggesting I sell some properties to enjoy life. Patricia would comment about friends who had generous parents who advanced their inheritance. They were subtly trying to get their hands on what Teresa and I had built with so much sweat. But I'm a Southerner, and Southerners are naturally suspicious. I would smile, change the subject, and keep my observations to myself. Deep down, a little voice told me something wasn't right, but I silenced it. "He's your son, Sebastian," I'd tell myself, "your flesh and blood." Little did I know I was about to discover how much blood can be diluted by greed. It was at the beginning of this year that Richard came with the trip proposal. We were having lunch on a Sunday as usual. Patricia serving that bland food she calls healthy. Lucas on his phone, as always. Sophie telling us about school. That's when Richard cleared his throat and began, "Dad, we're planning a family trip to Orlando, Disney World, Universal, all that stuff. I thought it would be nice if you came along. I confess I was surprised. I had never been one for international travel, even though I could afford it. I knew the entire country because of my work, but had only left the US twice, a honeymoon in Cancun with Teresa and a technical trip to Panama many years ago. Orlando with those parks had never been my dream. Orlando? Me? But why, son? I'm not one for riding amusement park rides. Oh, Grandpa, it'll be fun, Sophie said excitedly. There's lots you can do too. It's not just roller coasters. Lucas finally took his eyes off his phone. It would be cool having Grandpa there. Patricia smiled, but I already knew that smile. It was the same one she gave when she wanted to sell land for more than it was worth. It would be great, Mr. Sebastian. A family trip all together. It's been a while since we've done something like this. I looked at my son. There was something in his eyes that didn't convince me, but I decided not to insist on my suspicion. After all, it was a chance to spend time with my grandchildren, who were growing up so fast and would soon be too busy for their old grandfather. And how much is this whole amusement going to cost? Those parks aren't cheap, you know. Richard shrugged as if money was something of little importance. About $15,000 or so. Good hotel, tickets to all the parks, car rental, food. I've worked out a complete budget. I almost choked on my beans. $15,000. Are you crazy, boy? Dad, that's money that doesn't end. It's a unique experience. The kids have never been, and you deserve to enjoy life too, right? After so much work. The conversation continued, and in the end, I gave in. Not because of the argument about enjoying life, that always sounded like an excuse to spend needlessly to me, but for the chance to see my grandchildren's joy. Sophie, especially, who had always been the most attached to me, was radiant at the idea. We agreed that I would pay for the trip as a gift to everyone. In the weeks that followed, the topic of the trip dominated our meetings. Richard asked for my card for specific purchases, hotel reservations, plane tickets, park ticket packages. Each time he mentioned a figure, I felt a twinge in my chest, but I repeated to myself that it was an investment in family memories. 2 weeks before the scheduled date, Richard created a group text called Orlando Trip 2025. It included me, Patricia, Lucas, and Sophie. He sent photos of the parks, tips for attractions, lists of what to bring. I participated little, just observed. I was never much for technology, but Teresa had insisted I learn how to use a cell phone before she passed. You'll need to communicate with the world, she'd say. And as always, she was right. The day before the trip, I went to their house to sort out the final details. Everyone was excited, suitcases open throughout the living room, passports on the table. And my ticket, Richard. I haven't received anything by email. He exchanged a quick glance with Patricia before answering. It's all set, Dad. I printed yours along with ours. I'll give it to you tomorrow at the airport. That pang of suspicion returned, but again I pushed it to the back of my mind. Don't be paranoid, Sebastian, I thought. He's your son, for God's sake. And then came the big day. I woke up at 5 a.m. I had my coffee calmly, checked my suitcase once more. I had exchanged dollars the previous week, separated the medications I needed to take, even bought some new clothes for the occasion. I called an Uber and went to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. We had agreed to meet at the airline check-in at 8 a.m. I arrived punctually, as I've been all my life. They were already there with carts full of luggage. Patricia made up as if going to a party, not for a flight of several hours. Lucas and Sophie on their phones, Richard checking documents. I approached feeling that mixture of anxiety and excitement one has before a trip. Good morning, family. All ready? It was at that moment that I noticed something strange in Richard's look. He came toward me, pulling me a bit away from the line. Dad, man, I need to tell you something. My heart jumped. What's wrong? Some problem with the flight? He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd made since boyhood when he was nervous. So, there was an unexpected issue. I forgot to buy your ticket. I was paralyzed, trying to process what I'd just heard. What do you mean, forgot? How does someone forget to buy a ticket for a family trip? Sorry, Dad. Lots of things to organize, you know how it is. And now there's no more room on the flight, it's full. I looked at Patricia and the kids, who were now watching the scene from a distance. Patricia feigned an expression of surprise, but there was something in her eyes. Satisfaction. Lucas went back to looking at his phone, avoiding my gaze. Only Sophie seemed genuinely embarrassed. "And what do you suggest I do now, Richard? Go back home and wait for you to return in 2 weeks?" He gave an awkward smile, as if he were asking to borrow the car, not abandoning me at an airport after I had spent $15,000 on his trip. "Go home and we'll talk later. Dad, I'll make it up to you somehow, I promise." At that moment, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. It wasn't just the frustration of the lost trip, it was the way he spoke to me, as if I were disposable, as if I were an Uber driver he could dismiss after the ride. "Richard, I paid for this entire trip, $15,000, and you tell me you forgot to buy my ticket." He looked around, embarrassed that I was mentioning money out loud. "Dad, we'll sort this out later. The flight's leaving soon. We need to check in." "Go then. Go with God. And may He give you some sense, because it seems you were shortchanged in the distribution." I turned my back and walked away, with the weight of my 71 years seeming doubled in that moment. I crossed the airport terminal like a ghost, not looking to the sides, just wanting to get out of there as quickly as possible. I got another Uber, and when the driver asked if everything was okay, the tears I'd been holding finally rolled down. "No, my boy, everything is not okay. But it will be." I returned home devastated. More than 50 years building, saving, planning for the family's future. For what? To be treated like a burden, an inconvenient old man who interferes with the young people's fun. I entered my apartment and threw myself into the armchair in the living room, the one Teresa had chosen before she left us. "Oh, Teresa, it's good you didn't live to see this," I thought. She always said I spoiled Richard too much, that he needed to learn the value of things, and as always, she was right. After sitting there for a while, ruminating on the humiliation, I decided I needed to do something. I called my lawyer, Mr. Paul, who had handled my affairs for more than 30 years. I quickly explained the situation and asked him to come to my apartment urgently. When I picked up my phone to show the messages from the trip group, I had the biggest surprise of the day. There were 17 new messages. I opened them curiously. It was the Orlando Trip 2025 group. They had forgotten to remove me from the group. With my heart racing, I began scrolling up to see previous messages, and that's when the world completely fell apart. A week earlier, they were already talking about leaving me at home. Patricia: "Richard, is your dad really going?" Richard: "He has to go. He's paying. LOL. Patricia: "But after he swipes the card, Richard, tell him you forgot his ticket." Lucas: "Grandpa's going to be pissed." Richard: "He doesn't even like parks." I continued reading, feeling each word like a stab. Patricia: "Better this way. Imagine having to push an old man around Disney." Richard: "Right? And he'd complain about everything." Sophie: "Dad, that's messed up." Richard: "Sophie, adults are talking." I stood there paralyzed, looking at those messages. It wasn't forgetfulness, it was a plan. A plan to use my money and leave me behind, like discarding an old object that no longer serves a purpose. When Mr. Paul arrived, I was in another state of mind. The initial pain had given way to a cold clarity, the kind that only comes when you're betrayed by those you trust most. "Mr. Paul, I need your help with some urgent matters," I said, showing him the messages on my phone. He read everything, shaking his head in disbelief. "Sebastian, this is—" I have no words. "But I have actions, sir, and I want to take them now." First, we called the bank. I cancelled all the additional cards that Richard had, and which at that point were probably already being used in Orlando. I transferred the $15,000 I had set aside for the trip back to my main account. Then, with Mr. Paul's help, we contacted the hotel in Orlando. We cancelled all the reservations, the same with the car rental and other services I had paid for in advance. "This will leave them without a place to stay," Mr. Paul commented. "Exactly," I replied. We finished the cancellations around 2 p.m. Their flight had departed at 10 a.m., which meant they were already in the air, unaware of the storm awaiting them upon landing. "What else can I do for you, Sebastian?" asked Mr. Paul. "Now, sir, we wait, and while we wait, I want you to help me make some changes to my will." The following hours were spent in preparation. I reviewed all my assets with Mr. Paul, the properties, the company shares, the bank accounts, Teresa's family farms, everything I had built with so much effort, and which until that morning I had imagined would go to Richard and his family. "Are you sure about this, Sebastian?" asked Mr. Paul after noting my instructions for the new will. "It's a drastic decision. I've spent my life building assets to secure my family's future, but family is who respects, who honors, who values. And today I discovered I have less family than I thought." Around 8 p.m. the calls started. First Richard, then Patricia, then Lucas, one after another. I didn't answer any. The messages began to arrive next. Richard: "Dad, pick up, please." Patricia: "Mr. Sebastian, it's urgent." Richard: "Everything's been cancelled here." Richard: "Card doesn't work." Richard: "The hotel cancelled our reservation." Patricia: "We have nowhere to stay." I confess that part of me felt a bitter satisfaction with each desperate message that arrived. Throughout the night, my phone didn't stop ringing and receiving messages. I counted 99 missed calls by dawn. Richard: "Dad, for the love of God." Patricia: "Everything's cancelled." Lucas: "Grandpa, pick up." Richard: "The kids are on the street." Patricia: "Help." At no point did I answer or respond. I just observed like someone watching a movie whose ending they already know. Among all those desperate messages, I noticed something interesting. Only Sophie didn't call or send a message. I imagined she, at least, was too ashamed to try to contact me after seeing the family's plan revealed. The next day, I learned from Mr. Paul, who contacted the Brazilian consulate in Miami, that they had to ask for help to return. Without a hotel, without money, without reservations, they ended up returning on the first available flight 2 days later, in economy class, with a long layover in Charlotte. 14 hours of uncomfortable travel, quite different from the direct first-class flight I had originally paid for. During the 2 days my family was stranded in Orlando, without money and without reservations, I wasn't idle. With Mr. Paul's help, I not only rewrote my will, but also took other important measures. First, I contacted a private investigator, a longtime friend of Mr. Paul's. I asked him to conduct a complete investigation of the construction company's finances over the past 2 years, since I had handed control to Richard. Something had been bothering me for months. Projects that took longer than normal to complete, budgets that exceeded estimates without convincing explanation, clients who complained of duplicate charges. "Sebastian, are you sure about this?" asked Mr. Paul. "An investigation like this might reveal things you may not want to know. Sir, I've seen my son's character laid bare today. Nothing else will surprise me." Next, I made a complete assessment of my personal assets. Teresa's family lands alone were worth about $1.8 million. The investments and properties added another $500,000. It was a considerable fortune, the fruit of decades of hard work and cautious investments. "And how much does Richard know about these assets?" asked Mr. Paul. "He knows we have properties and investments, but he's never been interested in the details. He's always been more about spending than accumulating or investing." In the new will, I completely redid the distribution of assets. Richard, who previously would have been the beneficiary of practically everything, was now disinherited, except for a small house in Stone Mountain in the outskirts of Atlanta, valued at about $200,000, enough to prevent him from contesting the will for complete disinheritance, as Mr. Paul advised me. Lucas was also practically disinherited, receiving only a small plot of land in the countryside of little commercial value. Patricia, who had never been directly in the will, would continue to be excluded. Sophie, on the other hand, became the primary beneficiary of almost all the assets, with one important condition: she would only have access to the assets upon turning 21. Until then, everything would be managed by a foundation created specifically for this purpose, run by Mr. Paul and 2 other trusted attorneys. "Was she the only one who tried to prevent the plan?" Mr. Paul asked. "I don't know if out of true affection or conscience, but at least she showed some sense of decency," I explained. "I also wrote a letter for Sophie, which would be delivered along with the will in case of my death, explaining my decision. Sophie, my dear granddaughter, if you're reading this letter, it's because I'm no longer among you. I want you to know that you were the only one who said, "This is messed up," when your father and mother planned to abandon me at the airport. For this and for the love you've always shown me, I decided that all my assets will be yours when you turn 21. Don't tell anyone about this letter or about the will. Use well what I've built. Always remember that wealth without character is disguised poverty. With love, your Grandpa Sebastian. While we were finalizing these details, the detective began to bring the first results of his investigation, and they were alarming. Richard had created shell companies that provided inflated services to the construction company, money that left the company and returned to his personal accounts. In 2 years, the diversion totaled almost $120,000. "This is criminal, Sebastian," warned Mr. Paul. "Forgery of documents, tax evasion, embezzlement." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of that revelation. My own son, not content with treating me like a burden, was also stealing from the company I had built from scratch. And what can we do about it? We have 2 options. We can confront him with the evidence and demand the return of the money without involving the authorities, or we can take this to the police and the district attorney. I asked for time to think. This decision was more difficult than the one about the will. One thing was to disinherit an ungrateful son, another, quite different, was to see him in jail. While I reflected, I received news that they had managed to board a flight back to the United States. They would arrive the following morning after an exhausting journey. I decided that I would confront them personally with all the evidence in hand, not just about the plan to abandon me at the airport, but also about the embezzlement from the company. I wanted to see in his eyes the reaction when he realized he had lost everything because of his own greed and ingratitude. The plane landed at Hartsfield-Jackson at 6:20 a.m. I asked the driver who had worked for me for years, Juvie, to take me there. Not to pick them up, they could figure out how to get home themselves, but to observe their arrival from a distance. I saw them leaving the arrival gate, dragging their luggage with exhausted and dejected expressions. Richard was constantly looking at his phone, probably trying to call me again. Patricia had disheveled hair and smeared makeup. Lucas dragged his feet, head down. And Sophie, the girl, was looking around as if searching for someone, for me perhaps. I asked Juvie to take me back home. It wasn't yet time for the confrontation. I let them return on their own to feel a little more the taste of abandonment they had tried to impose on me. That afternoon I received a text message from Sophie. "Sophie, Grandpa, I know you don't want to talk to us right now, and I understand. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened. It was wrong and I knew it. I should have done more to prevent it. Forgive me." It was the only message I responded to. Me. You don't need to ask forgiveness for what you didn't do. Your father and mother should be begging for it. I'm disappointed, but not with you. I'll call you tomorrow, just the 2 of us. The next day, as promised, I called Sophie and arranged to pick her up from school. I took her for ice cream as I used to when she was little. "Grandpa, they're desperate at home. Dad won't stop pacing back and forth. Mum has cried so much her eyes are swollen. And what do they say about what they did, Sophie?" She lowered her head. "Dad said it was just a joke that went wrong, that he was going to buy you another ticket later. And do you believe that?" She was silent for a few seconds before answering. "No. I saw the messages in the group. They planned to leave you. And after they saw that I cancelled everything, what did they say? Dad went crazy. He was shouting that you couldn't do that the money was rightfully his, that he was going to sue the bank. Mom cried, saying they were humiliated there. Lucas just kept complaining that he missed the trip." I took a deep breath. It was exactly what I expected. No real remorse, just anger at having been caught and punished. "Sophie, I'm going to tell you some things you don't know about your father, but first I need you to promise you'll keep it a secret." She agreed, and then I told her in simple terms about the embezzlement from the construction company. I didn't go into technical details or exact values, but I made it clear that her father was stealing from his own company. "And what will happen now, Grandpa?" "That depends on him. I'm going to give your father a chance to fix things. If he shows true remorse and returns what he wrongfully took, we can resolve this as a family. Otherwise, I left the phrase hanging. Sophie was intelligent enough to understand what went unsaid. After dropping her off at home, I sent a message to Richard, me. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at Mr. Paul's office. Come alone. Serious matter about the construction company. The response came almost instantly. Richard, Dad, thank God we really need to talk. Can I come by your place now? Me, no. Tomorrow at Mr. Paul's office. The next morning I arrived at the office half an hour early. Mr. Paul had already organized all the evidence. Bank statements, falsified invoices, contracts with the shell companies, everything meticulously documented by the detective. When Richard arrived, he seemed a shadow of the confident man who had left me at the airport 3 days earlier. Deep circles under his eyes, unshaven, wrinkled clothes. He tried to hug me, but I stepped back. Sit down, Richard. We have a lot to discuss. He sat, visibly nervous. Dad, before anything else, I want to apologize for what happened. It was a stupid joke. I was going to buy you another ticket later, I swear. Mr. Paul intervened. Mr. Richard, we have here the messages from the group text that clearly show it wasn't a joke. You deliberately planned to use your father's money and leave him behind. Richard's face paled even more. How did you... You forgot to remove me from the group, I explained. I saw all the messages, including your wife saying she didn't want to push an old man around Disney, and you saying exactly. When Lucas warned that I would be upset, Richard tried to explain, but there was no possible explanation. When he realized this, he changed tactics. Okay, it was wrong, I admit. But Dad, why did you have to go so far? Cancel everything, leave us stranded there without money with the kids. We went through hell. We had to beg for help at the consulate. What? You abandoned me at the airport after I paid $15,000 for your trip and you think I went too far? Richard, you still don't understand the gravity of what you did. Mr. Paul placed a folder on the table. And that's not all, Mr. Richard. We have here evidence of serious irregularities in the management of the construction company over the last 2 years. The color completely drained from Richard's face. What irregularities? One by one, Mr. Paul presented the documents, the shell companies, the inflated invoices, the diversions to personal accounts. With each new revelation, Richard sank further into his chair. This is a crime, Richard, I finally said. A crime that could land you in jail for several years. Dad, I can explain. There is no explanation for theft, my son, but there is a chance for reparation. I'm giving you 2 options. First, you return every penny diverted, step away from managing the company, and we put this behind us. Second, we take this evidence to the police and the district attorney, and you face the legal consequences of your actions. He looked from me to Mr. Paul, incredulous. You would report your own son? Would you steal from your own father? How much do I need to return? $120,000 in 30 days. Richard let out a nervous laugh. And where am I supposed to get that money? You know I don't have it. Sell the condo I gave you, sell the luxury car, do whatever it takes, but return the company's money. And if I can't, Mr. Paul intervened. In that case, Mr. Richard, the evidence will go to the authorities, and I should warn you that tax evasion and embezzlement are serious crimes. Richard was silent for a few minutes, processing the situation. Finally, with a trembling voice, he asked, "And after this, after I return the money, where do we stand?" "You will be removed from the company's management. You may keep a position on the board without executive powers. And as for our personal relationship, that will depend very much on your behavior from here on out. How much do you have, Dad?" "In total, about 20 million. That question revealed so much about his character. Even in that cornered moment, all he thought about was how much he could inherit one day. "Richard, do you know how much I have in total assets?" $2.3 million, most of it in your mother's farms, which have appreciated greatly in recent years. His eyes widened. $2.3 million? Yes? And you just lost any chance of seeing that money because of a $5,000 ticket and a petty plan to leave me at home. He sank into his chair, finally comprehending the magnitude of his error. He had not only betrayed his father's trust, but had thrown away $1 million inheritance out of sheer immediate greed. "What do you mean by losing any chance? You disinherited me?" Mr. Paul answered for me. "Mr. Sebastian made changes to his will yesterday. The details are confidential, but yes, there were significant changes to the distribution of assets." "You can't do that. I'm your only son." "I can, and I did. And if you try to contest it, the evidence of your crimes goes straight to the police." Richard left the office defeated, with 30 days to get the money and the certainty that he had lost much more than a trip to Orlando. In the weeks that followed, he sold the condo I had given as a wedding gift and a plot of land he owned. He managed to gather the amount and returned it to the company as required. Patricia, when she learned of the financial situation and the changes to the will, didn't take long to show her true face. Less than a month later, she filed for divorce. Without the prospect of $1 million inheritance and with her husband removed from the company's management, the marriage no longer seemed so advantageous to her. Lucas, who had actively participated in the plan to abandon me, initially took his father's side, but when he realized there would be no more easy money, no international trips, he began to distance himself. Teenagers have a refined radar for detecting where power and money lie. Sophie was the only one who maintained constant contact with me. She would visit regularly. We would talk about her studies, her plans for the future. I never mentioned the will or that she would be the main beneficiary. I wanted our relationship to be based on genuine affection, not financial interest. As for the construction company, I hired a professional manager to take control. The company began to prosper again without Richard's embezzlement. I kept him on the board as promised, but without any decision-making power over finances. 6 months have passed since that morning in Mr. Paul's office. It seems like yesterday and it seems like a lifetime ago. You know how it is. Life has these things. Time passes differently depending on what you're feeling. Things have changed a lot around here in Atlanta. Richard sold the condo I had given as a gift and a plot of land he owned in his name. He managed to raise the money to return to the construction company as we had agreed. When you lose everything, you start to value the little that remains. As I had predicted, Patricia filed for divorce less than a month later. A gold digger is like that, in wealth and in health, but never in poverty or sickness. She didn't even disguise the reason. She told Richard straight out that she hadn't married to live on minimum wage. Now she's out there, already found someone else, an older businessman. May God make them happy, and may he keep his eyes wide open to her character. Lucas, my oldest grandson, was furious at first. Teenagers are complicated, aren't they? One day he's planning to leave me at the airport. The next he's outraged because he can no longer take the international trips he was used to. But life is a great teacher. He's working part-time at a fast food place after school, not because he desperately needs to, but because his father decided it was time for him to learn the value of sweat. I confess, I felt a small point of pride when I heard that. Sophie continues to be my faithful companion. She comes to visit me 3 times a week, sometimes more. We talk about everything, school, friends, dreams for the future. She wants to study medicine, wants to care for the elderly, says she was inspired by me. Imagine that. I never mention the will to her, of course. I want our relationship to continue being what it has always been, based on true affection, not interest. Richard and I, well, we're rebuilding gradually. He was removed from the company's management as agreed. He maintains a position on the board without executive powers and receives a modest salary. He started working as a consultant for other companies, using his knowledge of administration. It's no longer the life of luxury he had before, but it's honest, at least. At first he tried to blame me for the separation, for the decline in his standard of living. "You destroyed my family, Dad," he said, in one of our first meetings after everything. I replied calmly, "No, my son, you destroyed your family when you planned to abandon me at the airport. I just exposed what was already broken." Gradually, his anger diminished. Reality imposed itself. 2 weeks ago, he came to dinner at my house, brought a wine. We talked about trivial things. At the end of the evening, already at the door on his way out, he said something that surprised me. "Dad, I understand now why you did what you did. In your place, I would have done worse." I didn't respond at the time. I just gave him a tight hug, one of those hugs you give when words aren't enough. He left with watery eyes, and I confess mine were too. Last night I received a call from Sophie. She was crying. "Grandpa, Dad is begging for money. He asked to borrow $500 from my friend Julia, Uncle Charlie's daughter." I sighed deeply. Richard still hadn't learned to live within his means. "And you, Sophie, what did you do?" I said I don't have any. That if he needs money, he should talk to you directly. "Good girl, Sophie. Thank you for everything you do for me. You respected me, Grandpa. You deserve respect in return. It's that simple." I hung up the phone thoughtfully. That night, sitting on the balcony of my apartment, looking at the Atlanta city lights, I reflected on this entire journey. $15,000 was the price I paid to discover my family's true character. Expensive, perhaps, but also cheap, if we think about it. How many people spend their entire lives surrounded by falsehood, never discovering it? How many die believing in the love of people who are just waiting for the inheritance? Teresa always said that we only know someone's true character in 3 situations: in sickness, in financial hardship, and in the moment when the person thinks they're on top. I saw all 3. Richard abandoned me in a moment of fragility. Then I discovered he was stealing from the company, and finally I saw how he treated those he considered inferior. In this case, me, his old father. The other day at Lenox Square Mall nearby, I ran into Richard. He was sitting on a bench in the food court with a coffee in front of him, dressed in simple clothes without the expensive suits of the old days. Our gazes met. He got up, came toward me. "Dad, how are you?" I looked into his eyes for a while, as if seeing a stranger. "Fine." "Dad, forgive me." "Richard, you planned to abandon me. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. It was deliberate, calculated. It was a joke, Dad. We were going to buy your ticket later." "Really? And why did you say exactly when Lucas mentioned I would be upset? Why did your wife say she didn't want to push an old man around Disney?" He lowered his eyes. There was no answer. $2.3 million, Richard. That's what you would have inherited one day. "It's not funny, is it, Dad? I'm struggling. The consulting company isn't working out, the expenses in Orlando. You ate well, didn't you? In the 5-star hotel with the credit card I paid for. I'm not your father. Your father is the credit card, see if it feeds you. Was I harsh? Yes, perhaps even cruel. But there are moments when harshness is necessary for the lesson to be learned. Richard needs to understand that actions have consequences, that life isn't just about receiving, it's also about giving and respecting. Last week, Sophie called me with some news. "Grandpa, my dad is begging for money." And I said I don't have any. "Good girl, Grandpa, thank you for everything. You respected me, you deserve respect." At my age, you learn that respect is the foundation of any relationship. Without it, there is no love that can endure, no bonds that can hold. And respect isn't something you impose. It's something you earn day by day with consistent words and actions. Today, when I look at my life, I feel a certain peace. I lost some illusions. It's true. I discovered that my son wasn't the person I believed him to be, that my daughter-in-law was only interested in my money, that my oldest grandson had learned to be calculating and cold like his parents. But I also gained clarity. Today I know exactly where I stand, who I can count on, what to expect from each person, and that, at my age, is an invaluable comfort. And I gained Sophie, a granddaughter who showed character when everyone around her was failing. A young woman who has a bright future ahead, not just because of what she will inherit one day, but mainly because of what she already is, a person of integrity, compassion, and strength. That afternoon at Hartsfield-Jackson, when Richard told me to go back home, I thought it was the end of everything, that I had lost my son, my family, my place in the world. Little did I know it was just the beginning of a new phase, a phase of truth, authenticity, reality without masks. $15,000 to discover that my son resented me. It was cheap, because now he is learning to live without easy money, without the guaranteed inheritance. He's learning the value of honest work, of the sweat of his own brow. And perhaps one day he'll become the man I always believed he was. He planned to leave me at the airport. I left him in life, subject to the consequences of his own actions. 99 missed calls that night. They weren't missed calls. They were 99 missed opportunities to be a good son over the years. Here in Atlanta, they say, it's the old man of the 99 calls who cut off his ungrateful son. I've even become a kind of urban legend. Imagine when someone is ungrateful, they say, be careful not to become a Richard. My son had a father with $2.3 million. Now he has 99 unanswered calls and will never have another one answered, unless he really changes, learns the lesson, understands that money doesn't buy character, that inheritance isn't a right but a privilege, that he discovers the value of a sincere hug, an honest piece of advice, a look of genuine approval. I'm old, but I'm not made of stone. Deep down I still have hope. Perhaps Richard is learning his lesson. Perhaps when he has lost everything, he'll discover that the most valuable thing was always there. The love of an imperfect father, sometimes harsh, but genuine. If you've made it this far, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. And if you really followed me to the end of this journey, comment below with the word respect. Only those who watched will understand the meaning. Respect is what I sought to preserve when everyone wanted to reduce me to an inconvenient old man. Respect is what I found when I decided not to accept humiliation. I thank the Grandpa's Voice channel for this opportunity to share my story. Perhaps it will help someone going through something similar find the courage to stand up, to demand respect. A loving hug from this old man who learned that sometimes you need to lose to gain much more.